Imagine a desert battlefield. The sand is still wet, not with rain, but with the blood of men who fought yesterday. The wind is quiet, and in the silence, you can hear people crying, not from defeat, but from victory. Because yesterday, something happened that would change the future of Islam forever. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. The night after the great battle, the night after Battle of Badr, and what happened on the 18th of Ramadan is something the world rarely talks about. But I will never forget it. The battle had ended. But the battlefield of Badr did not look like victory. The desert was quiet, painfully quiet. Just hours earlier, the air had been filled with the sounds of clashing swords, galloping horses, and men shouting the name of Allah. Now, there was only wind. Soft desert wind, brushing against the sand. And beneath that sand lay the bodies of warriors who had fought with everything they had. Some of them were our enemies. Some of them were our brothers. We were only 313 men, farmers, merchants, young boys, fathers. None of us had come to Badr expecting a battle. We had come to intercept a caravan. But now everything had changed, because Allah had given us a victory that none of us could explain. And as the sun slowly disappeared behind the red desert hills, we realized something. This was not the end of the story. In fact, the most powerful moments were still about to happen. In the middle of the battlefield stood the messenger of Allah, Prophet Muhammad. His armor was dusty. His face showed exhaustion. But there was something else in his expression, something deeper. Gratitude, relief, and sadness. Because victory always comes with a price. Some companions were smiling. Others were staring at the ground in silence. And then someone whispered, "Look at the messenger of Allah." We turned our heads, and what we saw shocked us. The Prophet was not celebrating. He was raising his hands to the sky, making dua. Long, emotional dua, because he knew something we were only beginning to understand. This victory had not come from our strength. It had come from Allah alone. But what happened later that night left even the strongest companions speechless. That night, while many of us tried to rest on the cold desert ground, the Prophet stood alone. The sky above Badr was filled with stars. The desert air was cold. And in the quiet darkness, we heard something unexpected. The messenger of Allah was crying. Not loud crying, but the kind of crying that comes from a heart overwhelmed with emotion. He raised his hands and said, "O Allah, if this small group of believers is destroyed today, there will be no one left to worship you on this earth." Some companions later said, the Prophet prayed so long that his cloak fell from his shoulders, and Abu Bakr gently placed it back on him and said, "Enough, O Messenger of Allah. Allah will fulfill his promise." But even after victory, the Prophet continued to pray, because he understood something most people forget. Victory is not the end of faith. It is the beginning of responsibility. And the next morning, we would witness something that would define the character of Islam forever. The sun rose slowly over the desert. Its light revealed the true reality of the battlefield. Bodies were scattered across the sand. Broken swords, shields half buried in dust. The smell of battle still lingered in the air. Some companions walked quietly between the fallen warriors, not with pride, but with reflection. Because many of these men had once been our neighbors in Makkah, men we had known our entire lives. But years of oppression had led to this moment. Then the Prophet gave an unexpected command. Gather the bodies, even the enemies, even those who had tortured Muslims for years. Because Islam does not celebrate death. It honors human dignity, even in war. And what happened next would leave the companions deeply emotional. Then the martyrs were brought forward. 14 believers, 14 heroes, men who had stood between Islam and destruction. Some were very young. Some had left wives and children behind in Medina. And now, they would never return. As we carried their bodies, the desert felt heavier with every step. The Prophet stood beside them, looking at the faces of his companions, men who had believed in him when the entire world rejected him, men who had risked everything for the truth. And one by one, they were buried in the sand of Badr. But what the Prophet said at that moment sent chills through our hearts. He said that these martyrs had already entered paradise. Imagine hearing that. Your friend, your brother, is already in Jannah, But the emotional moments of Badr were not over yet, because now, the prisoners were brought forward. And what happened next shocked everyone. About 70 Quraysh warriors had been captured. These were the same men who had tortured Muslims in Mecca. Men who had beaten slaves. Men who had forced believers to flee their homes. Some companions expected punishment. Some expected revenge. But the Prophet did something completely unexpected. He chose mercy. Many prisoners were offered freedom if they taught Muslim children how to read and write. Think about that moment. A battlefield victory turning into a school. Because Islam was not just building an army, it was building a civilization. But there was something else about the battle that people could not explain. Something supernatural. Something that many companions had seen with their own eyes. And when the Prophet confirmed it, the believers were left in awe. During the battle, some companions reported something unbelievable. They had seen warriors fighting beside them. But these warriors were not human. Their clothes were bright. Their faces were unfamiliar. And their strength was incredible. Later, the Prophet confirmed what had happened. Allah had sent angels to help the believers. Thousands of angels descending from the heavens, fighting alongside 313 believers. This moment was later mentioned in the Qur'an. Because Badr was not just a battle, it was a miracle. But the biggest lesson of Badr was still waiting to be revealed. And it came through the words of Allah Himself. After the battle, verses of the Qur'an were revealed. And these verses completely changed how we understood what had happened. Allah said, "You did not kill them, but Allah killed them." And when the Prophet threw a handful of sand during the battle, Allah said, "You did not throw when you threw, but Allah threw." These words reminded the believers of something powerful. Badr was not about swords. It was not about numbers. It was about faith. Because when believers trust Allah completely, the impossible becomes possible. Now think about this. 313 believers against an army of 1,000. No advanced weapons. No powerful armor. No military training. Just faith. And yet, that small group changed the course of history. Because Badr teaches us something that every believer needs to remember. Sometimes in life, your problems feel like an army of 1,000, and you feel like you are only 313. But Allah can change everything in a single moment, just like He did at Badr. Today, more than 1,400 years later, the desert of Badr still exists. The same sand, the same sky, the same quiet wind moving across the battlefield. But beneath that sand lie the heroes of a moment that changed history. Men who believed when belief was dangerous. Men who stood beside the messenger of Allah when the future of Islam was uncertain. And because they stood firm, Islam reached every corner of the world, including you, including me. So maybe the real question is not, what happened at Badr? Maybe the real question is this: if we were standing on that battlefield, would we have been among the 313?